This is our CS 1400 class, and today we're going to talk a little bit about control structures. Specifically in this one, if statements and switch statements. And now before we go on with what an if statement is, we got to talk about a few operators that we might use in comparing things. So this is a greater than sign that you learned from math. That sees if something's greater than something, obviously, and then you've got a less than. This one right here, a double equals, this is to compare to see if two things are equal, whereas a single equal sign will make an assignment. So for example, if I say x equals 5, if I have two equal signs, that will see if x is equal to 5. If I have one equal sign, it will set x equal to 5. And you don't want to do that if you're comparing, because then your comparison's all weird. So that is comparing to see if things are equal. And make sure you put two equal signs in your if statements. Okay, this one is not equal. The exclamation means not. This is greater than or equal to and less than or equal to. And I think I am like a couple of steps ahead of my animations. I should have been clicking this whole time. Look at that. All right. Okay, if statements. And if this is an example of the most basic if statement. Once again, we have our little operator right there, less than. We're assuming we have some sort of variable I force that has some value to it. It's either a value from the user or set somewhere in the program. So this is just kind of a code snippet. So you have to have the word if, and then you have to have these parentheses here, and inside the parentheses you have to use one of those operators to make some sort of kind of question. It's called a Boolean statement, meaning some sort of statement that evaluates to be true or false. So in this case we're seeing if I force is less than 10. So if they have 5 set as their variable, 5 would be less than 10, and it would run this code and set the message as a Jedi hopeful. If their iForce variable were like 15 or something, that would be a false statement, and it would completely skip till past this bracket. It wouldn't set the message at all. So here is kind of just your scaled down version of it. You have to have if, you have to have the condition, you have to have opening and closing brackets, and then over here, here's an actual example. This determines if this is using modulus division, and it determines if a number is even or odd based upon the modulus division. So for example, if num is 5, 5 divided by 2 has a remainder of 1. So that's not equal because this is comparing it to 0, so it would skip this. But if we had the value 4, 4 divided by 2 is equal to 0 because there's no remainder, so it would print out that that's an even number. Okay, so here's our condition. This is one way. I'm going to click really quick because I'm going to switch the brackets. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to put animations in here to show you that you do want to line your brackets up, and you do want to tab in the statements anytime you go deeper into a set of brackets. This next slide has it. This is the exact same thing. The only thing I've done is move the bracket up here. Some people like them up here. Some people like them like on the previous slide down here. It doesn't matter so long as you are consistent throughout your code. Oh yeah, there's the animation that says there's where the bracket is. Okay, an else statement allows you to have some sort of default, so if the if statement is not true. So suppose our once again we have our same iForce variable. We're going to pretend our iForce variable is like 50. 50 is not less than 10, so it's going to skip this and automatically run this. It's going to say they're a Jedi Knight no matter what. So that's kind of what an else is. It's like the catch-all. If this is not true, just catch all this over here, whatever that is. If this is false, run this. That is an else statement. Here's our kind of a basic example. I have the brackets down below this time. Here is our even and odd with actually an odd value. So here if our number is 5 again, it's going to skip this and run this right here and print out that 5 is odd. Okay, the next one is an else if. An else if makes it so that you can have multiple messages and it will just automatically choose the first true statement. So suppose you have an iForce variable and it's once again set to 50. That's a false statement, so it's going to skip it. That's a false statement. 50 is not less than 25. 50 is not less than 50. It's pretty close, but it's not equal. 50 is not less than 50, it's equal to. So it would skip this and it would run the else in this situation. However, suppose that our I-force variable were, let's do 26. So it's going to skip this and it's going to run this statement right here since we have a 26, and it's going to set them to a Jedi Padawan. Okay, so now if you look at the next one, 26 is still less than 50, but it's not even going to check this because this if-else-if structure says only run, if this is all, it says this is all one big structure, including this else, all one big structure, and just run the first true statement. And so it's going to skip this and it's going to skip the else, and it's just going to run our 20, what did I say, our Jedi Master? One of those. Did I say it wrong? I don't think I did, but now I don't remember. So if it was 26, it would run this one because 26 is not less than 25. So hopefully I corrected it if I was wrong to begin with. Okay, there's our basic statement for it. I think I have an example here. There we go. This is doing if numbers, how many digits a number has. So let's suppose we have the value 5. 5 is not less than 0. It's going to skip that. 5 is less than 10, so it's going to print out one digit number. If we had something like 10 or 11 or 12, it would run the else. This says it has many digits. Okay, so here is two different if structures. So the only way that this code on this side differs from the code on this side is these four letters right here, this else if. In this section, this is a series of if statements. In this section, we have an if-else-if structure. There's just no else on the very end. Okay, so in this one's trying to determine if there's snake eyes, and if there's a die 1 and a die 2. I've got a die 1 and a die 2, and suppose they did roll snake eyes where they have both dice are a 1. In this situation, it would say if die 1 is equal to a 1, it's going to count, so our count would be 1. If die 2 is equal to a 1, it would count again. So at the end of these two if statements, our count would end up being 2. It would count 2 times. It would run both if statements because these are independent if statements. Now let's compare the same example. We roll snake eyes, same example with an if-else-if structure. In this situation, that's a true statement, so it counts 1, but it skips the else-if because it only runs the first true statement. So at the end of this code, our count would be 1 instead of 2 like it were on this side. So that is the difference between a bunch of if statements and an if-else-if structure. If statements runs every single one of them that are true. If-else structure only runs the first true statement. I'm pretty sure there's lots of quiz questions on this exact concept, so just a warning. Okay, now you could combine some statements using an or an and. And you've got your formal definitions down here. Returns true if one statement is true, returns true if all statements are true. That's really confusing. Just know the fact that you understand the word or and. And that's, don't overthink this one. So your mom says, okay, clean your room and do the dishes, and I'll take you out to a movie. You're going to clean your room? Yep. You're going to do the dishes because you have to do both of those in order to go see your movie. If you only do one of those, no movie. You have to go do the dishes. Now she says, clean your room or do the dishes and I'll take you out to a movie. You're not going to do both. You're just going to do one of the least amount of things. You're only going to do one. You only have to do one to get your prize, if that makes sense. So don't overthink and or. They're super easy. Just think of them like you know English. Here is an example. Suppose I have a dice value, and if my dice is 7, or I think I have this exact example later on, so I'm going to show you this first. Okay, this right here, this symbol right here for the or, it's just this key right here on the keyboard holding the shift. You put 2 of those in, no space between, and that gives you the or. And just because I showed you where the or was, I had to show you where the and was, even though I'm pretty sure you already know where that one is, but this one's kind of a confusing one to find. Okay, and yeah, this is the same exact example. I have a die 1 and a die 2, and I want to see if both dies are equal to the value 1 to see if I have snake eyes. Snake eyes is when you roll 2 ones. So this one's saying if die 1 is equal to 1 and die 2 is equal to 1, then you have snake eyes. If we had accidentally put an OR in here, that wouldn't work because you could roll a 1 and a 6, and that's not snake eyes. So that is AND. Here's our OR example. In the game of craps, you can roll a 7 or 11, and I can't remember if that's making you win or if that's making you lose. I've actually never played the game before, but I know it's significant. So anyway, in this situation, it's saying if your dice total, if the sum of the dice added together is a 7, or if that dice total happens to be an 11, then that's when you get craps. Now keep in mind, you might be tempted to leave some of this out. So you might say if dice total equals 7 or 11. No, you can't do that. You have to have two complete Boolean statements in there. You have to have dice equals 7 or dice total equals 11. You can't shorten this at all, which is unfortunate. I mean, you'd think you could, but you know. All right, so that is an OR statement. And the last one I want to show you isn't an if statement at all. It's a switch statement. And a switch statement is a decision made on a value of a switch variable. And your variable can only be a char or an int. It can't be a double, it can't be a string. It has to be a char or an int. So in this situation, I can switch size. And I have a bunch of cases for what that size is. If the size is 0, it sets this value. And this break right here breaks out of the set of brackets, and so it skips the rest. So I have a case 1 that gives you this price. If this size variable is equal to 1, it would do this one. If this size variable were something else, it would run the default. Now you can have a couple of cases in here. So like suppose you wanted a case 0, case 1, case 2 all for here, and you could put all 3 cases before this break. It's once it hits this break, that's what ends the situation for your cases. Now the difference between a switch and an if statement, they both kind of do the same thing. An if statement is more versatile. You can do multiple variables instead of just one, and you can test ranges, like if something's greater than or something, if something's less than something. A switch can't. It's only based on a single variable, and you can only say if it is equal to something. And you might say, what's the point? Well, it's good for menus, and that's they're actually more efficient. They use memory a little bit more efficient, so it speeds up your program if you could use more switches than if statements, but they're not as versatile as if statements are. Okay, so here is an example of a switch statement. We're assuming that we have like a random number to determine a suit of cards, and the random number is between 0 and 3. Now if it happens to be 0, it's going to change the suit to hearts. If it happens to be 1, it's going to change it to clovers. 2 will be spades, and anything else will be diamonds. And so this is kind of an example when you could use a switch statement if it's based on one variable. I gave you another one too, it looks like. So here's an example of more cards. This time it's determining if a card is an ace, a jack, a king, or a queen. But very similar though. I can't remember why I put 2 very similar examples in. But there you go, another example. Alright, so in the next chapter, in the next video, we will discuss loops and show you how that works with our control structure. So we'll see you in the next video.